Defiant by Brandon Sanderson concludes the 4-book sequence called the Cytoverse. There actually will be more books in this series written by Jancy Patterson, and the book leaves open more storylines that can certainly be followed. And there's actually already 3 more novellas in the series, so it will continue to be a bigger thing. However, the mainline books that Brandon is going to write are now concluded.
This is Fantology.
You may have heard of us.
This will be a high-level, no-spoiler review. We'll do a full spoiler conversation later on. Expect a podcast episode to come out about that in, a few weeks or so. But for now, what did I think of Defiant? Well, I thought it was a fitting end to the series and overall an above-average Brandon Sanderson book. I don't really love YA anymore. I'm starting to get a bit older. YA is not really my genre. However, I feel like I can still kind of appreciate a good YA book, even if a lot of the humor and romance is a little young and cringy for me. And I feel like this book really has all the beats that you'd want, and a lot of people are really going to enjoy the ending of the series. So if you're a fan already and you're going in hoping the conclusion is good, I think you will be pretty pleased with how everything ends up. And if you are a fan and it's been a while since you read and you're a little fuzzy on some of the details, you can check out our most recent episode, which is a full what to know before going into Defiant. We don't really know everything. We're definitely not 17th chart experts or anything like that. But Ben and I did do somewhat of a walkthrough of all the major plot points. And myself, I hadn't read any of the Cytoverse since Cytonic came out, and I felt like it was a pretty good primer. I think one thing people are going to be wondering going in is, do they need to read the novellas before getting into Defiant? Which is a natural question because Brandon didn't write them, and the way that they were released, on Audible at least, which is more and more popular obviously, they're all separate credits, so you only get 8 to 10 hours. Maybe check me on the length there, but you don't get a full book with your 1 credit, and there's no full Skyward flight credit release. So I think a lot of people have not read the novellas going in. My answer to that is I feel like you should know what happens, but you don't necessarily need to read the books. That's the situation I was in. I read the recaps on Coppermind, and I had a pretty good idea of what happened. There were enough refreshers throughout the course of Defiant that I didn't ever feel lost. However, I think you get a better experience. You probably get a more rich experience if you do read those. So I'm going to say if you love the series, then absolutely you should go and read those 3 novellas before getting into Defiant. However, if you're someone who really just kind of likes Brandon's books and wants to see an end to the series and you've enjoyed it so-so, which is really me up to this point, I think you're also just fine reading a summary and then going into Defiant. Okay, let me get into some ratings for the actual contents of the book. The plot, I'm going to give 8 out of 10. I felt like it was a bit of a slow start, and there was a lot of navel gazing throughout the first half to 60% or so. A lot of those things pay off in some emotional beats. However, some were not really as strong as I would have hoped. I think partially that's because I didn't have a super strong connection to all the characters, partially because there's maybe a little bit of a younger audience with some of the emotional things that he wanted to accomplish, and they didn't really seem super unique in all the themes. But, it was all executed well. It was all there. On paper, I think it's well done. It didn't really have that extra pizzazz that I would like from a Sanderson book. So overall, as far as the themes and the arcs and everything, well done, 8 out of 10. As you'd expect, there's a big finish. It's the end of the series. It's the end of a Sanderson book. Every book has got, the big Sanderlanche, right? We come to expect this, and we are not disappointed at all in Defiant. I thought the last 40% was by far the best part of the book. It was action-packed. It was exciting. There were unique things happening. The action was jumping around from character to character, and you're kind of on the edge of your seat wondering what was going to happen. You had somewhat of an idea, that, probably things will work out, but maybe, that's kind of the feeling going through it, and I feel like really it all paid off pretty well. There were some surprises and twists and some emotional things that happened. Some things did get me. I don't want to be too much of a downer on all that, and at the end of the day, all of the important plot points were resolved, but there were some things that were set up for future books. So if you're a big fan of the series and you want to continue some adventures with some characters and see what's going on in the future of the Cytoverse, that will be happening. Characters, I will also give 8 out of 10. I thought the main characters, your Spensa, Jorgen, Mbot, Gran was kind of a surprising character. All of the main ones were there, and these were the main arcs. This is what the story is all about, and that was well done. one kind of strange thing about books 2 and 3 was it kept on introducing us to a new cast of characters, and I feel like in some ways that was paid off, in some ways it wasn't. By the time we get into Defiant, the cast of characters that we're familiar with through the 3 books is really, really big. We've spent a lot of time in each of the books with different characters, and for most of Defiant, we're kind of back to our mainline characters from the first book. That doesn't mean we don't see other characters, but it's mostly about the ones that we saw quite a while ago. If you've read the Skyward Flight books, then you've seen them more recently. But the characters that were there on screen, I thought paid off pretty well. But on the other hand, the cast at this point was maybe a little too big to give everyone their time to shine. So at times it did feel like we were just kind of doing a tour of all of the characters, making sure everyone was at least touched in the final book, which is good, but at the same time, I don't know, maybe stretches it a little too thin. That's not to say the side characters were not there and were not good. Personally, I really enjoy Hesho, and I think he has some funny moments. He provides the best humor, in my opinion. One thing that I didn't like as much about the characters was I felt like the way that the main antagonistical force, I'm going to try to be kind of vague here, not give anything away, but the way the main conflict was developed and the characters on that side of the conflict I thought was maybe a little sudden and strange, and going back in my recollection of the previous book seems like a bit of a jump for some things, and I don't know, I just kind of accepted it, but at the same time I was like, okay, wow, these are really kind of leveled up here. So I don't know, that was just me. Maybe if you've read it more recently, you're fine with that, but I do feel like a little strange here. Setting, I'm going to give 9 out of 10. I really like the setting of this universe. It's obviously sci-fi, and it's obviously young adult sci-fi, but at the same time, there's a really unique Sanderson flair to what's going on here. I feel like there were a lot of Star Wars influences, and there's some moments that definitely kind of wear that on the nose, and that's fun, and that's totally fine. You can do that in a good way, and I think we see it here, and I'm encouraged by what this means for the Cosmere, because it felt like a natural progression of Brandon's epic fantasy into a sci-fi world, and for a while now on the Cosmere books, it's felt like epic fantasy bleeding into sci-fi. Now here we have it kind of on the other side, where the fantasy stuff is into the, kind of the receiving end, I guess, of the formula. So I'm excited to see what happens in future Cosmere books. I feel like he's pulling off the sci-fi elements really well, and this book introduced a few new things that set up a big set piece action in a fun setting that you could really kind of imagine without going too big and overboard. So all in all, setting really well done, probably the best part of the book. Pacing, I'm going to go 7.5 out of 10. I thought after the slow start, which drug a bit for me, it was awesome, the whole ending part. So if that, I don't know, maybe just a little more interspersed. He does the usual thing where, in the beginning there's a side adventure that bleeds into the rest of the plot, and Brandon's really good at doing this and kind of follows that formula really well. But it just kind of wore on me a bit. I felt like it was maybe a little too long there through the middle half, kind of like the 30 to 50% range, just kind of, all right, let's go. And so finally, when it did get going, it was awesome. Prose is, again, a 7.5 out of 10. As usual, it's the solid Brandon Sanderson kind of utilitarian, clear glass prose. It's got the young adult flair to it, so there's a lot of cheesiness that, at this point in my life, I don't really love, but I totally recognize that it is a young adult thing, so I think it's a very average prose book. So all in all, I'm giving Defiant 8 out of 10. I feel like this is an above average book. I feel like it's an excellent conclusion to the series, wrapping up everything in a pretty satisfactory way. Had everything that you'd want in the book, really. I mean, going into the book, if you told me this is what it was going to be, I would say awesome, great job. It doesn't completely blow me away, but at the same time, I really enjoyed my reading experience.